So as Melanie said, my name is David Quinn, and it's so nice to see everybody here who's interested in housing outside of the box. I think it's a great subject, and it's something that affects everyone. And in my own situation, I was, as Melanie mentioned, have background in architecture. I have a degree in architecture and do work in that field, and I have been living in Halifax now since graduating from Dal, and have been renting for years, very close to the Q lofts, actually, in that part of Halifax, and my mother was living in Manitoba, and her partner died a couple of years ago, and because of the changes that occurred in that situation, we kind of took a look at how we were living as a larger family, and we decided to engage in a bit of an experiment as well, where she ended up moving to Nova Scotia from Manitoba, and we thought of the idea of me becoming a renter to her. And so that's sort of the model and the experiment that we've been playing with, and it's not without its challenges, but it's also been a great experience, and I think it's beneficial for me, and also has been beneficial for her as well. And it wasn't exactly what we had thought it was going to be, but it turned out to be in some ways a lot better. Initially, the plan was to get something in Halifax, and something that had 2 units in it, one above and one below, and so that I could be, that we could be close, share meals, and spend time together. But the market was just more than what she was able to afford, and what ended up happening was we found a beautiful property in the Bay Area, and so the project became one of taking a single-family home and altering it, and we were looking for something that would actually adapt well to that, and my experience is that a lot of houses do adapt well to that kind of a situation, and it doesn't take a lot to make that kind of a transformation. And so what we were able to find was a beautiful house with space around the yard, which is something that she was used to from her previous living situation, that had two floors that were suggestive of 2 independent units, and so with very minor alterations, changing a utility room into a bathroom and expanding an area where there was a sink in the lower floor into a little kitchenette, it easily became, or is in the process, I should say, of becoming two living units. And so this situation is recognized in the bylaws and in zoning and in the municipal planning strategy for HRM and for St. Margaret's Bay Area. And the term that's used in the bylaws is an auxiliary dwelling unit. So that's what they call shared housing. And I think that so the definition. I'll just read the definition of it. It means a self-contained dwelling unit within a single unit dwelling, in which unrestricted access can be gained through the main dwelling unit, and which auxiliary unit comprises less than 35% of the gross floor area of the dwelling. So it's very technical, but basically it's allowing for two separate units within a single family home. And is this, David, does this forward through the?
This is the one.
Oh, this is the one. Thank you. So the the bylaw acknowledges that there's a need. Thank you.
Yeah, it comes at the other end.
Thank you. So the bylaws acknowledge that there's a need for it, and they're already providing for that in quite a few of the zones in the St. Margaret's Bay area. It's hard to see, but basically all of the zoning areas along the bay, the water, are residential areas, and probably half of them are zoned in areas that are zoned to permit auxiliary dwelling within them. So I guess the message there is that it's already possible to do something like that. And most of the buildings that fall into those zones are adaptable in a small way. And it's also, you know, a part of the message is just that flexibility, you know, being willing to think outside the box kind of in here as well is a big part of this. And so there's already that potential. There's also potential to expand or to work within a single-family house where it's not permitted. There are a lot of residential zones where auxiliary dwelling units aren't part of it, aren't part of the equation. But there are other things that may be included, which allow shared living kind of to occur in those types of housing. Oops. Somehow I've turned it off.
Which one do you want? Which one?
Right. I'm just going to put this here. Yeah. So there's also an acknowledgement in the bylaw of obstacles to doing these types of developments, and most of them have to do with a perception that it will change the quality of neighborhoods if you begin to permit this type of development, that it will cause a change to the neighborhood where you get more renting and that kind of thing. But I think that there's reason to be optimistic that there's lots of opportunities to work with this way, whether the idea of an auxiliary unit in a house is permitted or whether it's just working within an existing single-family home where you adapt part of the home to permit extended family or shared living situations. And hopefully, so, and by that, things, very simple things like just adding kitchenettes or additional bathrooms, additional bedrooms, and privacy zones are the main kind of ways of working within existing housing. And possible future directions just include expanding the zones where these types of developments can occur. So taking some of the zones which are currently not allowing auxiliary units and advocating for allowing that to occur in more residential areas. And also kind of a separate idea, but permitting some of the types of uses that allow for accessory buildings to be included on single-family lots, would also be helpful, and that would open the door to things like tiny housing to be introduced, and other forms of accessory buildings on lots. So that's my message, and if anybody has questions, I welcome them.
That's what you get for sitting in the front row. I get to be first. I hadn't actually realized there might be some legal ramifications of this. I've actually turned my house into an auxiliary dwelling where my daughter and two granddaughters occupy the main floor and the second floor.
Right.
And I and my wife occupy what would be the basement, except it's a walkout basement.
Right.
And we have our own bedroom, kitchenette, bathroom, and family room.
Yeah.
This doesn't violate any rules of the road.
So I should say that also I'm not an expert on the bylaws, but or at least I don't represent HRM. But no, I don't think that is a violation of any bylaw that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Do the additional units have to always have an outside entrance? Or can they, is that part of the, and maybe that's a bylaw question.
Well, I don't think that's part of it. They have to have access within the single-family home, and I think it's helpful if they do. But I don't think it's required in the bylaw. I don't think.
Okay, and I'm asking vis-a-vis Halifax, not St. Margaret's Bay.
Right. I think the definitions probably apply in both places similarly, but yeah.
It can vary from, the issue with bylaws, maybe I'll just speak to this for 1 second.
Please.
The issue with bylaws, and one of the reasons why we can't get into, thanks David, even shorter, we can't get into a lot of specifics, and even we talked to people in HRM planning and asked them to send someone, and they also talked about how they couldn't get into specifics because it can change even from one side of the road to the next, and it's a very kind of a complicated issue. So the best thing is to, to look up the information for your very specific area, and we're going to provide resources on where all of this is found online as well, or then even to contact planning and ask, for some support in unraveling that for your specific space.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then just as the term accessory building, I wasn't sure what accessory structures meant, or just that they're not the main building.
Yeah, it's a separate building to the single family house or the multi-family building on a lot.
Okay, and that's the mention of tiny homes or converting
right.
Or a shipping container. In
most situations, accessory buildings aren't permitted to be a dwelling. You can use them for other uses, for storing or for doing for shops, but you can't. In most situations, you can't use them for a dwelling. But I think it's possible to. It's possible to reintroduce that idea and expand the possibility of that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question, but I can also speak to what some people's questions are because I'm in the process of building an accessory unit with my partner in our home, or an auxiliary unit.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yep.
Within the home. And there is a lot of gray areas to it, and it is very different from neighborhood to neighborhood. In the north end, it has particularities very different from the south end.
Right.
But one of the big components is, are you gaining income from the other unit? So, John, if you're collecting rent from your daughter, that makes a whole world of difference to whether it's what it's considered. It's a lot about the income level.
Right.
And the question that I had was, is there any examples of communities combating this idea of neighborhood character change by unifying and saying we don't have a problem with these kinds of things that you're aware of? Because I would think that if the community doesn't have a problem with it, it wouldn't be a problem for the bylaw.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that groups like this are probably helping kind of bring these issues up and advocating for those types of changes, and that there's just the pressure of the way the economies and the world is changing, and that it's kind of moving in this direction and allowing, removing barriers and allowing for these types of things is, I think, just sort of in the air. So, but
it also seems to be kind of a conflict between we can't build more condos if we allow people to home their own parents and family members within their own dwelling, and so that's an economic battle between the two formats.
Perhaps.
That's my opinion.
Yes, perhaps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. My question kind of related to the previous question a little bit, and I just want to say it makes a whole lot of sense to me to house seniors in homes and live with them in that way. It happened in my family as well in a way that worked well.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of the neighborhood resistance is due to what she said, gaining income from the subunit and this increasing the tax assessment of the building, which would increase rents in the neighborhood and push people out that way. Do you have any information on if that happens or if it actually doesn't happen, or could speak to that?
Well, no, I don't really have information that way, I'm afraid, no.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and I was just wondering if that happens or not.
Yeah.
And I guess it would depend on how much the rent is, if any, from the room. That seems like a big piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We were due to have, one of our speakers was going to be Alan Howell from HRM's Affordable Housing Work Plan from the HRM.